Welcome to, on a beautiful Minnesota afternoon, to the Metro Blue Line Extension Corridor Management Committee. I'm Charlie Zelli, Chair of the Met Council, and it's my honor to chair this CMC. I think we all know each other, but it's helpful for public record to go around the room and introduce ourselves. And this, I'll start to the right.
Great. Irene Fernando, Hennepin County.
Jeff White, Hennepin County.
Hi, Uli Farhat on behalf of Commissioner Marion Green, Hennepin County.
Leslie Kindaris, General Manager at Metro Transit.
I'm Shua Salas with, I'm one of the Blue Line Coalition members.
And I'm Candy Bacon, and I'm a Blue Line organization.
Welcome,
also.
Candy.
Meg Forney with the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board.
Jeremiah Ellison, Minneapolis City Council, and I think we have another city rep coming in.
A couple of city reps.
Jason Greenberg, Robbinsdale resident, representing the Community Advisory Committee.
Trace Kaiser, City of Coastal City Council.
Bill Blonigan, Robbinsdale Mayor.
Connie Soebjan, Department of Transportation, Metro District.
Yasin Osman, Met Council, District 7.
And we've been joined by Mayor Fry from Minneapolis. Welcome. Thank you. Great to see everybody and members and alternates. Just a couple of housekeeping items. These mics in front of you are not little knobs. They're actually live mics, and they are capturing everything. This meeting is being recorded. And of course, as always, if you have any questions about or want to see presentations, that go to the project website, which is bluelineext.org. That's just one word, bluelineext.org. And for members of the public who might be watching this on streaming video, please feel free to submit any comments you'd like to Nakongo Segulo, and you can do that until next Friday, the 25th, and they will be part of the official meeting record. So today we've got a lot of information and a kind of a confluence of a number of things that we've been talking about, and it's all happening a lot this summer. The supplemental draft environmental impact statement, which we had our first hearing just this last Tuesday night. Good to see you again, Candy. And we're going to talk about the municipal consent process and also get an update on a refined, it'll continue to be refined, but the cost and ridership estimates. So with that, this is just as a reminder, we're not actually having public testimony at this meeting. That is not because we're not getting lots of public testimony. Certainly, we've had some hearings, and we will have another hearing on July 23rd during the day. But we have a lot of topics to cover, so I want to make sure we get those in. But first, we had a CMC meeting on June 3rd, and there was a meeting summary sent out in advance. So if there's a motion and a second to approve those notes. Thank you. Thank you. Any discussion, corrections, additions? All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those notes and summaries are approved. So on to our committee reports. And we have Jason Greenberg, who represents the Community Advisory Committee. I'm sorry, Tara Watson is unavailable today, so we're not going to get an update from the BAC, but we are fortunate, Jason, to have the CAC. So, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to members. So we met on June 26th, covering a lot of the similar topics that we'll be reviewing today. And there wasn't a video available. There was a recording, but the video's not available, so I was just going off my notes from the actual meeting. So I'll kind of lump it all together. So one big thing that we talked about in our conversation was questions about transit access to stations. So right now, there's buses, they connect everyone to where they need to go. How are those routes going to change, and how will access for people change to get to the stations? Specifically Brooklyn Park and Minneapolis, lots of talk around that. The feedback from the project was more around that it might take a long time to have some of that information, and there was a little bit of pushback there just around the idea that we're trying to get transit to people that need reliable transportation that don't have that today, and that they can't necessarily wait years to know what's going to happen. And so I know that we're following, and I think we were all understanding that there is a process to be followed, but given this is an equity line and that there's a lot of people that need access to transit, that maybe we need to do something to move some of that up. We got into the impacts around the SDEIS, talked about the OMF in Brooklyn Park. There were some questions about that, and those were addressed. Questions about contamination and hazardous materials. I will say after the meeting and just interacting on social media and actually in the meeting, just the idea that the length of time between giving feedback or giving community responses to the project, the feedback to that officially is through the SFEIS, if I understand that correctly. And that won't be available for a long time, and it's creating trust issues within the community. They feel like it's just kind of going into into a void, and that they're not getting responses on what's actually going to happen. Again, getting back to like our typical process, and we respect that that is a thing, but to wait a year after you've submitted comments to a website, they feel like that we've heard that before, and then there's not really a response, even though there is. It just is taking longer than what the expectation is out there. So again, that kind of gets back to the comment period, and we talked about that, the lack of trust. Another thing that came up was around noise impacts and the fact that there are a number of noise impacts that were listed. I live in Robbinsdale. There were no noise impacts for Robbinsdale, even though there are people that are living, directly on the line next to stations. And so I get that there, again, is a formula and a way that that's determined, but that might need to be addressed given the fact that there are people that are living so close to the train, to the station, and it's not that there's a moderate or a severe impact, there's no impact in Robbinsdale, and that seems inconsistent with the reality of how this project is getting built. And then finally, I'll say around municipal consent, we had a lot of questions about the outcomes and the options, just talking through, there's the three available outcomes and those options, just a lot of discussion about like, what does that mean, the amendments? It seems like there's some things that are clear because they don't fall within the current plan, but then like what determines that? And so we just had a long and healthy conversation about that. And that kind of covers what we talked about in the CAC.
Thanks, and thanks for the feedback.
Yeah.
And for those that might be wondering, the F stands for final as opposed to draft. So this is a very prescriptive process, federal process, but we understand, and trust is an important issue for us to consider how we can
Thank you.
build on that, but appreciate that feedback. Any comments, questions?
Sure.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, maybe somebody can, so what if I hear one aspect of what you're sharing, which makes sense. Somebody inputs feedback and then it doesn't come back for a year. I'm presuming there'll be some touch points prior to the final, or how might community get a sense of, like, can somebody address that? I know the large milestones, but I think part of the question is, if I'm a person who's engaged, how will I know either what made it in or what's being considered? Just adding a little bit of context to it might be helpful. Because I hope it's not a year also. I mean, I would hope.
As it happens, Kelsey Young, who is our manager of the environmental process, is going to be giving a report. So you can kind of start by maybe answering maybe some of these questions for Jason.
Sure, Chair, CMC members. We will plan to bring more information back, both to this group. We'll bring back a summary of comments that we hear during the comment period, and we'll go over our next steps in the August CMC meeting. But we will also plan to bring back and do additional outreach around what we heard, what it means relative to the project, and our efforts to what we heard and continuing to avoid, minimize, and identify mitigation for adverse impacts. So some of that mitigation we know needs additional outreach and community involvement and collaboration with corridor cities and other stakeholders. So we will plan on moving that work ahead in the fall in parallel with developing the supplemental final EIS where those formal responses will land.
Thanks.
Great. Is that,
Yeah.
that's an answer,
hope
great. And keep us plugged in as to how people are feeling along the way. Any other questions for Jason, others? All right, as I already introduced, Kelsey Young is going to be joined by Neha, there you are, and Neha Domley, and to really get an update as to where we are in the process for the supplemental draft environmental impact statement, and we're well on our way.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. We look forward here to giving you an overview of the key findings and information about the supplemental draft environmental impact statement. Related to grounding us in the SDIS findings, we'll also discuss a little bit about the project history. How did we reach this phase? Refreshing our memories on the focus of the SDIS, the build alternative. That's the comparison to the no build alternative. We'll go over the findings, highlight some environmental justice related analysis and next steps, and then talk about our comment period and next steps, which is ongoing now. As many of you are well familiar, the supplemental draft environmental impact statement builds on over a decade of planning for the Blue Line extension as a light rail extension of the existing Blue Line, going back well over a decade. And just as a reminder, the SDIS is studying the changes to the project since the 2016 final environmental impact statement and record of decision, building off our route modification study that concluded in a recommendation. And at that phase in 2022, the Federal Transit Administration notified us that the appropriate phase for environmental review would be to complete a supplemental environmental impact statement.
Before you move on, I got a quick question. Where is anti-displacement in all this?
Chair, committee members, I will touch on that as part of the environmental justice section.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that.
All right.
And just to recap our understanding of the project, the northern third of the project remains on the same light rail alignment as the previous phases of study, and the southern roughly 2/3 of the project corridor is on new alignment following County Road 81, West Broadway, and then crossing over in Minneapolis to the east side of 94. So the purpose of the project is to connect the communities of Minneapolis, Robbinsdale, Crystal, and Brooklyn Park with an extension from the existing Blue Line light rail. And the project also includes both the stations and other bicycle, pedestrian, and roadway infrastructure, as well as park and rides. The purpose of the supplemental draft EIS is the first step in our National Environmental Policy Act process related to the supplemental environmental impact statement. And in this document, we include an evaluation of social, environmental, and economic impacts as well as benefits. And the reason that we are doing a supplemental document is when there are significant changes to the project, and we know that there's a strong likelihood of new impacts and benefits since the previous phase. And of course, we know that that is the case for this project, and that's why we are supplementing the previous phases of environmental review. The next phase will be, as has already been noted in this meeting, supplemental final environmental impact statement that also includes conclusion of our Section 4F process, and we anticipate that concluding in an amended record of decision. In the last few months, we've reviewed the purpose and need of the project a bit, so maybe we'll just talk about this at a high level, that the purpose and need of the project forms the basis of comparing the build alternative and the no-build alternative. And of course, the purpose of the project is to provide that transit service. And in the upper right-hand corner of the slides, we see a little icon that shows where within the SDIS document more information can be found about each of the topic areas that we'll touch on today. So purpose and need is a whole chapter where we outline lots of mapping and other information that supports the need of the project. And since we just talked through these purpose and need factors and the updated need factors recently, I won't walk through these, but just to note that lots more information is found within the SDEIS. Chapter 2 of the SDIS covers the alternatives development process. So that is where we tell the story of how we came to be at this stage of the project, where we underwent the route modification process in the period of 2020 to 2022 that concluded in a recommended alignment. And then there's also additional information in the SDIS about the continued evaluation of alignment and design options over the course of 2022 and 2023. So more information is found within Chapter 2 about those options that were evaluated. Information about, for example, the Lindale and East of 94 options that lives in the supplemental draft environmental impact statement appendices. So that's why that information is being presented, since there was analysis available about that. But primarily our focus is on the build alternative, which is reflective of the September 2023 Corridor Management Committee recommendation about the alignment and stations. So that is the build alternative. That is our basis of comparing to the no build that is throughout the supplemental draft environmental impact statement. And before I turn it over to Neha, and Neha will give us a summary of each of the technical analyses chapters, I just want to frame us in that the SDIS forms our preliminary understanding of the impacts and benefits of the project, as well as outlines our next steps to identify mitigation, particularly in the environmental justice realm, which I will talk about after we go through this section. And in this presentation, we are highlighting just the key findings. Largely, some of this may come off as focusing on the negative or adverse impacts of the project, and that is because those topic areas form our understanding of our next steps, our to-do list to continue to look to avoid, minimize, and identify mitigation for those negative impacts. But the benefits of the project are also key and outlined in the SDIS as well. And both the impacts and the benefits of the project are topics that we would love to get comments from our communities served by the project and impacted by the project about those negative and positive impacts and benefits of the project.
Thank you, Kelsey. Chair, CMT members. We'll go through, as Kelsey said, these slides represent very high-level impacts, mitigations, and benefits. There is more detail and nuance that is described in the SDIS chapters. So I'm going to go through them one by one with each topic. In the topic of community, we are seeing the impacts as the minor impacts to the amenities in Brooklyn, Park Crystal, and Robbinsdale. But in Minneapolis, there needs to be relocation of 7 community amenities. We are seeing loss of on-street and off-street parking throughout the corridor, and we're seeing visual, noise, and vibration impacts in certain locations that affect this community character. The mitigation for this topic is additional community character mitigation, especially on the 21st Avenue, that would be developed in collaboration with the community. The benefits identified in the SDIS are improved transit service, pedestrian, bicycle conditions, and that would basically create more connections, improve community cohesion, and accessibility to the community amenities. In the topic of property, we are seeing both partial and full impacts throughout the corridor in all the corridor cities. Some of the full impacts result in relocations. But we are continuing efforts to minimize and avoid property impacts, and the final impacts would be finalized in the SFEIS. The mitigation that we are seeing for this is payment of fair market compensation for impacted property, relocation, advisory services, reimbursement for moving, reestablishment expenses for commercial relocations. In the topic of business and economic effects, we are seeing some impacts. The first bullet is increase in property values, which can also be a benefit, but associated with that would be property tax increase, which would be an impact. In the construction phase, we're seeing business access disruptions as one of the impacts, seeing potential for displacement of property owners and renters due to rising prices is one of the impacts. The mitigation identified is implementation of anti-displacement measures and policies within the project that we can pull into the project and implement as a part of the project, and close coordination with key stakeholders and members of the public during construction. Benefits of the rails with this topic is positive economic impact in local economy, job creation due to LRT operation and maintenance, and increased earnings. Historic properties or Section 106. So Section 106 is the process that runs parallel to the NEPA process. It is basically identification of the properties that are eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, evaluation of impacts on those properties, and exploring the mitigation options for those impacts. That is the Section 106 process. The evaluation of impacts is underway. We are coordinating with FTA and SHPO. And the mitigations will be finalized in the SFEIS. In the topic of transportation, we are seeing that in the construction phase, some in the operation phase, temporary sidewalk and bike facility closures, disruption changes to vehicle traffic, operations, loss of parking are some of the impacts. The mitigation suggested is restripping, adding turn lanes, allowing U-turn movement, signalization. So basically some traffic calming strategies, traffic management strategies. Benefits would be adding a transit extension that would create more connections, light rail service, and improvement to pedestrian and cyclist safety, comfort, and accessibility. In the topic of contaminated properties and hazardous materials, this topic basically evaluates or studies the parcel along the corridor that have had historical uses or leaks or spills that basically change the quality of the soil and groundwater on or underneath the parcels. With that study, we are seeing that there are high and medium risk known or potentially contaminated sites all through the corridor. The mitigation is additional study. That is the second phase of this study that is actually sampling the soil and groundwater that is going on right now. And it'll be, the results will be documented in the SFEIS. And the benefits is the opportunity to remove contamination and potentially reduce future exposure risks.
Mayor Blangen, do you have a question?
Thanks, Chair. Could we see somewhere a map with dots on it that shows the 152 high risk and 288 medium risk contamination sites?
So Mayor, this map is presented in the SDEIS in Chapter 5.
It's already there.
It is there.
Thank you.
It's a thick document, so it's not all being presented, but I think if you get into that website,
Yeah, I have not read it.
it should be,
Don't hit print.
yeah, don't, right, have mercy on your printer, but it's available.
Thank you.
It'll flatten for like 10 minutes before it prints. Personal experience.
In terms of the impact, can we get more information on the construction impacts before, during, and after construction?
Chair, committee members, there's information, well, we will touch on that a little bit as it relates to the environmental justice topic area, but throughout the document for each of these technical subjects, we talk about both the operation phase and the construction phase. And we know that we will need to have extensive communication protocols and measures, detour routes, et cetera. So that's definitely a topic that we are calling in or identifying as a topic area, particularly as it relates to businesses that are owned by environmental justice communities or serve environmental justice communities, and that we're identifying that we'll need to do some additional beyond the norm type of strategies in that realm. So we would, again, welcome comments for what particular issues could be the subject of mitigation that we should consider.
And I just also wanted to add that in general, for these topics that are analysis topics, we have considered long-term and short-term impacts, which is construction impacts and operation phase impacts.
Go ahead, Anjali.
So these are, just for clarification, these are already contaminated sites. So these might be businesses with asbestos in them or something like that. These are already contaminated, not sites that, I just want clarification for everyone who's listening that these are sites that we would not contaminate. These are already contaminated existing sites.
Thank you, Councilman. In the topic of noise, as you all know, we collected a lot of data throughout the corridor. For the existing conditions, we added that to our model. The model gave us the project level impacts information, and we're seeing that there are moderate and severe impacts in the corridor. Most of the moderate impacts would be in Minneapolis, and all severe impacts would be in Minneapolis. The mitigation has to go through the set steps guided by the FTA guidance and the Met Council guidance, and we will work through those in the coming months, and the final mitigations would be finalized in the SFEIS. Similar to noise, we also collected vibration data to understand ground characteristics, and we are seeing that there are 2 residential properties that are impacted, which totals 28 dwelling units, all in Minneapolis, that have vibration impacts. Again, vibration mitigation has to go through certain steps, and we will be continuing to go through those steps in the coming months. The mitigation will be finalized in the SFEIS. Can I just go back quick and just mention something? So for noise, it is all outdoor noise. It's not indoor noise. And another point is on these 2 slides, I have not, or we have not included the construction phase in here, but in the SDIS, the construction phase is also talked about.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you,
Don't
Mayor.
have me.
Granted, it's judged based on outdoor noise and not indoor noise, but outdoor noise can become indoor noise. What are the locations that we believe to be most impacted? You mentioned that they were all in Minneapolis. Do we know the areas, the streets, the points that are most impacted by noise?
So Mayor, thank you for that question. So some of the severe impacts, or all of the severe impacts are in Minneapolis, but depending on how far they are and depending on the characteristics, that there are several different characteristics that need to be included in figuring out what mitigation path it needs to go through. And once our consultant gets more data for validating that data and collects more data, basically, they will be able to figure out where do they need to do the indoor-outdoor measurement to understand which specific properties need that.
Right. I guess if we've established that the vast majority, if not all of those locations are within Minneapolis, then I would assume we know what locations they are in Minneapolis. I'm just asking, and I'm not saying, obviously there are ways to guard against that and to prevent and to mitigate some of the issues. What are the pinch points right now?
Chair, committee members, Mayor, there are several pockets within Minneapolis where we're identifying noise impacts. There's a pocket along West Broadway. There are a number of severe noise impacts in the 21st Avenue corridor and several of the residential properties along 10th Street. So where we are seeing the greatest overall change in noise is in that 21st Avenue corridor. So
21st Avenue.
in parallel to West Broadway through that stretch where the light rail
Got it.
goes off of West Broadway.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Hey,
Thank you. with that, as far as vibration and noise and everything, is North Memorial been considered, at the hospital, excuse me?
We did evaluate or we did consider impacts to North Memorial in terms of it being a sensitive property, but the key activities within that building in terms of the operation phase, so once the light rail is up and running, are further away. So we are not identifying impacts there for noise and vibration, but we will continue to look at the construction phase, for example, high vibration and noisier activities such as pile driving, and looking at that as part of the supplemental final environmental impact statement.
Jason.
Yeah, so I think something that I didn't necessarily bring up specifically as part of the CAC feedback, but that was part of that conversation was just asking around like what determines the difference between moderate and severe, and that the formulas really comes down to, I mean, there is a formula for it, but it really comes down to decibels, right? So something that I know as an official, but that we had a discussion about was around, there are elements around frequency too, because like something might not necessarily be as loud, but if it only happens a couple times a day, it might not be that disruptive relative to if you're having something happen all day, every day, even though it's not as loud from a decibel standpoint. That was something that we talked about, so I thought it would be relevant in this part of the conversation.
Right.
Our last of our topic highlight slides here is related to Section 4F, which protects recreation properties as well as historic properties from conversion to transportation use within the SDIS and Section 4F evaluation. We are identifying a number of recreation properties and historic properties as well, where we are anticipating, FTA within this document is outlining their anticipated pathway to consider 4F, changes to 4F properties. And we are anticipating that we would have both de minimis, which means that the activities, features, and the attributes of the park are not adversely affected, as a pathway, as well as temporary occupancy, which is what it sounds like, temporary impacts during construction. So that this is a topic area that people and the park, various recreation resource owners can comment on during this comment period before we proceed with additional coordination with those park resource owners before FTA formally makes that determination. At that point, that is when FTA would seek concurrence from the park resource owners. And then on environmental justice, I'll do these slides here quickly. I think we've talked about these steps in the process in the past, that we first identify the environmental justice communities that are impacted and benefited by the project. We assess the impacts of the project overall, as well as the benefits, and then hone in on how do those impacts and benefits specifically relate to environmental justice communities. Continue to explore those ways to avoid, minimize, and mitigate for those negative impacts. So again, just to remind ourselves that environmental justice communities are defined through a federal executive order that talks about communities that have been adversely affected by persistent poverty or inequality, who experience disproportionate and adverse human health and environmental burdens. So a number of different identities are considered in this process, and as well as extensive community input in terms of who and what communities are identifying themselves as environmental justice communities that we should consider in this framework. So to hit our highlights here of our topic areas where we are identifying adverse impacts to environmental justice communities that do warrant mitigation, this is our to-do list and our strong area of our current focus and our next steps as part of mitigation work plan to address these topic areas. So the community impacts along 21st Avenue, the property impacts to businesses, particularly during that construction phase. Transportation impacts, we know that we've been hearing a lot about parking concerns, the noise and vibration impacts that we just talked about, as well as the displacement concerns. So this is where we are drawing that connection, is within the economic effects and environmental justice analysis of the displacement concerns that we've been hearing about from communities, that we're identifying that within the project framework as a topic area that, along with these other topics, warrants additional mitigation strategies that go above and beyond what we would do for the communities as a whole and non-environmental justice communities, basically. So within the environmental justice chapter, there's for each of these topic areas, we outline our anticipated next steps of what we plan to do to identify mitigation. So would welcome comments related to those next steps, or not that we need to be just constrained to what we outlined as our planned pathway forward to mitigate those impacts. If there are other ideas from affected communities, we would welcome comments of that nature too. And of course, within, oh, yes.
Kelsey,
Yes.
is there a central location where the cultural communities can get this information in their language?
Chair, committee members, we are primarily coordinating through our community cohort with Hennepin County to identify those translation and interpretation needs. So I think that is one resource. We also would welcome those kinds of requests to our outreach team within the project as well. We are our comment hotline. We haven't talked about our methods to receive comments, but we have a comment hotline that offers a greeting in English as well as Spanish. And then we have our comment form translated in a number of different languages, but would certainly be open to exploring other needs as well. So if there are requests, would recommend getting in touch with our outreach team.
Can I ask a quick question? Just for environmental justice communities that are identified, the tracks, is that fixed, or is that something that can change over time? So right now we see the shaded areas and the red lines. If there was something new, or like, that's the way that it is for the rest of this project, or are there additional communities that could be included?
Chair and committee members, just to clarify that this map here is just one example of one of the maps that is shown in the environmental justice chapter. And this is an existing tool provided by Justice 40, which is a federal initiative. So that's what this map is representing. In our understanding of the environmental justice communities in the corridor is based on demographic census data, other data as well. And so while we've, on a preliminary basis identified, what areas within the project we're identifying as environmental justice communities, if there is something that people think that we've missed, communities or groups of people, locations that we need to be considering in that EJ context, would welcome comments on that too. So
Super helpful, thank you.
We can pull in other locations and topic areas too.
Appreciate that.
And to wrap us up, that the environmental justice analysis also considers all of the benefits of the project. There are a number of transportation benefits of course, expanding transit service, but also the other infrastructure changes and updates that come along with a project of this magnitude. Additionally, we are identifying in the EJ analysis the opportunities of job access, job generation, as well as how the project could have some opportunities for how the land and the land ownership and redevelopment can move forward. Of course, we know that is both opportunity and a realm of concerns, but so that is why it appears as both an impact and a benefit within the SDIS. And then lastly, we are identifying environmental health benefits of the project. Of course, we know that environmental justice communities often have been on the receiving end of a lot of environmental burdens. And so that's why it's important to highlight these beneficial impacts of the project to environmental justice communities as well. And with that, the SDIS has been published and we are receiving public comments. Our comment period goes through August 6th. What we are doing with those comments, and we are already beginning to synthesize and consider how we move forward, informing our next steps of mitigation work plan and how we will go about responding to those comments. And just to reiterate, the comments that we are receiving are absolutely informing our next steps on this project and how we develop the supplemental final environmental impact statement. We will publish the formal responses in the SFEIS, but know that our outreach related to the project will continue on. It doesn't end on August 6th and then we totally go away. We will continue these conversations with the communities. So while we may not have formal responses in the interim, we will continue to, people will see us out in the community talking about these issues in our mitigation development. We had the first of our 2 planned public hearings on Tuesday evening. There were about 50 attendees and there were 8 people that provided verbal comments. We are receiving many more comments than that through online and our other formats, and just would welcome for people to encourage their communities to submit comments. Comments submitted through any method are considered equally. You know, you don't have to come talk to us at a public hearing for your comment to be important, although that is also welcome. And we do have one more public hearing coming up next Tuesday in Brooklyn Park. And just to leave us at this, that we are accepting comments through a number of methods here. Probably the easiest place to look for information is on our website, bluelineext.org, and you can get connected to our commenting opportunities. With that, I'll turn it back to the chair.
Great, thanks, Kelsey. And Neha, that is a lot of information. I know I do invite people to not only check this PowerPoint, but actually go to the document itself. This is the environmental section just by itself, double-sided, so I encourage you to kind of look at some of the maps. You don't have to read the whole thing, but kind of peruse it, because I think it is really valuable information. And that's helpful to understand, too, that reiterate that comments and opinions can be expressed in any way you'd like. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to extend gratitude. I mean, this is a huge lift. The original EIS is like this big, literally, when it's printed out. And to pursue a supplemental is a big lift. And we're, as we all know, we're a bit exceptioned in the FTA process. So I know it's a little sloggy and not certainly the pace that we always want, but really appreciate the attention to detail. And these are sections that are not often incorporated in EISs, as though, you know, to be this level of detailed is really, really impressive when we consider other projects and what they're including in what they're including is environmental, really. So very impressed. It's also kind of newer for us locally, some of these portions. So really appreciate the attention and absolutely look forward to the comment period and the feedback and the next steps as they come.
Yeah, thanks. Any other
And we've
comments?
come a long way since
Yeah, we've come a long way.
this 2016, sorry, one more. The fact that you get to start at 2016 when there's certainly people around the table who will arm wrestle if it was 1987 or 1993 or when it began, but it's the amount that has shifted from 16 to present and really from 2020 to present is really commendable.
Absolutely, thank you. Question?
It would be helpful to have more information on how mitigation strategies will be developed, and then also how corridor cities can help in the efforts of, like, say, TOPA policies.
Mr. Chair, committee members, our next phase is to dive into our mitigation efforts, and we have a planned next step of a mitigation work plan. So that will be information that we can share. We will also continue our coordination with our city partners. Primarily, we interact with, as us staff, we interact with the city staff, but of course, we'll continue the conversations here with this group, as well as other avenues. So definitely opportunities for continued collaboration with city partners and what they're wanting to do in collaboration with this project.
Mayor?
When I looked at your slide that showed what parks were being impacted, I did not see, and so maybe you can check on later, that the Lower Twin Lake boat landing operated by Three Rivers Park District was greened in there. So the way you're nodding your head makes me think you're aware of that. Okay, thank you.
It is, yes.
All right.
Commissioner?
Thank you. Just curious if, I don't think you might have this off the top of your head, but as far as the impacts on properties, I'm just curious of how those compare, let's say, to other lines. And of the 142 properties impacted, do we have any idea how many of them actual properties are going to be taken away, destroyed?
Mr. Chair and committee members, to come back to our summary slide here, most of those property impacts are partial acquisitions. So where we see the relocations here, and if you dive into the SDIS, there is, we also provide more information and more of a, breakdown by city of, the full acquisitions and also how many relocations are tied with those. To answer your other question, in terms of the full acquisitions and particularly the residential acquisitions, this is quite significant. This is a large number of properties. So to put it in that context of other projects. But we know that our work here is not complete. We are continuing to advance our property impact avoidance during the design development stage. We know that property impacts, particularly those full acquisitions with relocations, really have a large impact on people, where they live or their businesses. And this is, a key topic of our continued work.
So you do have a number of how many full acquisitions are? And could you tell me what those are?
Do you know
Locations?
off the top of your head? That information is definitely in the supplemental draft environmental impact statement, and we can follow up to provide that specifically.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
And then we, the park board, will be submitting a letter, but real concern that, as you indicated, that some parkland is not being mentioned in the 4F. Definitely Victory Memorial and Theodore Wirth are a huge concern, for us. And I know that there's some disagreement, shall we say, as far as interpretation of particularly the land ownership, et cetera. So we'll be clarifying that, but do know that those are huge concerns for the park board.
Okay, got that. Commissioner, did you want to?
Just briefly, I want to say that, this is pre-COVID, which I feel it was 18 decades ago. But those properties in Brooklyn Park, I know I personally have door knocked every one of those 3 times. And I can tell you, there are people who want to be taken. So we talk about partial and full. There are people who are like, I call it the don't leave me behinds, which is they're close enough to be affected, but not close enough to be fully taken, who asked the county, of which I know we bought a row of condos. We bought a furniture store because they couldn't wait, because the impact was immediate on their property, because they'd have to disclose it anytime they go to sell, or the furniture store. And so I know the county took a stance of where it made sense to look at. So yes, partial, full is impacted, but sometimes, having talked to some of those people, they were like, yep, take me, right? They wanted the whole thing gone because it was gonna be an effect on them that they'd rather just sell the property. And so I, coined that term, don't leave me behind, which is, they wanted to be taken. So I think I always think of those 2 categories. There's a third one that is in there and they'll show up as full takes. But I know the county has purchased a furniture store. We own a furniture store. We own condos and some of those things on preparation where people were like, you can't make me wait 5 years because I want to retire and I want to sell my furniture store and I can't because the rail's going to go right through the front showroom. So, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thank you, Kelsey, Neha. Now, let's have an opportunity to hear about municipal consent. This is a separate track and clearly really is more associated with the actual design of this proposed alignment. And there's an opportunity for actually our city partners and our county partners to vote on this in this process. Nick Thompson has many titles. One of them is interim project director of the Blue Line Extension. So welcome, Nick.
Chair, committee members, thank you for having me today. We are about to enter another process here. So as we're in the public comment period for the environmental SDEIS, accepting comments there, we're preparing as a project to begin the municipal consent process. And this is, whereas the SDEIS is more of a federal prescribed process, we are now entering a state prescribed process. As the chair mentioned, where the cities, affected cities and county get to provide local approval of the physical design of this light rail project. And so we'll be following the statute as outlined here on the screen. Each of the 4 cities and the county will be part of this process. It is a process that is managed by the Metropolitan Council per statute. And we've been working on the design of this project with each of the cities in the county from day one. Our staffs meet on a weekly basis, working through the design elements of this. There are different phases of a design, from preliminary to 15% to 30% design. And now we're just beyond 30% design at the municipal consent plan design phase. And so there's still a lot of design work to come forward, but this is the step in the process where we really want to have some assurance that we are on the right path with the design, where the stations are located and the alignment. So the municipal consent outcomes, we've been getting a lot of questions from the community on what this process is. This is a process that is a little bit unique to LRT projects, though there are a similar municipal consent process like MnDOT follows for major highway projects. And so it's not a process that comes up in all projects. And so we've been starting our communication about how this process works. A lot of people are asking about the process and what actions does a city or the county have. We've kind of framed it as there's 3 types of actions that can be decided. A city can approve the design. We're actually physically submitting the design plans to the cities. So that's the action they're taking on. So we anticipate next Friday we'll deliver these design plans. And so from that point, the city can take an action that approves the design plans as they've been provided. That means there is consent for the design in the community. They can take no action. That's a perfectly viable step. And that itself is providing consent for the design plans. The third one is a city or the county can disapprove the design plan, but if they do disapprove, they must outline the design elements that would change their disapproval into consent. And so those are the 3 kind of actions before the cities and the county. It is started by a public process, and I'll talk a little bit about that time frame. So we have worked with each of the city and the county about the public processes. So what we have on the screen here is preliminary. The Met Council and HICRA are the official starters of the process. And so we're planning for next week for Hennepin County Regional Rail, Hennepin County, and Met Council to take action to announce the public hearing date for municipal consent. And so per the statute, in the public hearing, there must be a public hearing within 30 days after the action. So we're anticipating that public hearing to be on August 26th, if our boards approve that action. And then from the day of the public hearing until 45 days later, that's the time frame that a city or the county have to take one of those 3 actions. And so we've worked with each of the city staffs and the county staff about when do they anticipate those days would be for when their actions would occur. Several of the cities had said they'll likely have some sort of public hearing in advance of the action. And I would just caution that these are actions that are controlled by the city and the county. And so until they officially announce these dates, these are all tentative until those actions But this seems to be the time frame that is being worked on for when each of those communities would take their required step for that action. And then it must be completed on that timeline by October 10th. So this is the phase we're about to enter into. It's really a confirmation of the consent for the design of the layout and the stations. Happy to pause there for any questions.
Any questions at this point? Yeah, go ahead.
Did you say the public hearing was September 26th?
August 26th
Oh,
is the,
thank you. That makes
the
more
current
sense.
action if approved by the council next week.
Mayor.
So is this coming back up? This is very helpful to see your interpretation of this and to see slide number 39, which tells us that there are 3 alternatives when some of us thought there might be 4, like giving consent on the condition that X, Y, and Z be added to the plan. And your slide here says, no, that's not an alternative. You disapprove, and then you say, if you did X, Y, Z, we would probably approve. So in a way, I can't see how any city would approve, like your 33% plan or whatever you've got. How would we know? But could we get more information? Could you talk to our city manager? I've got an email here from him that says we want more fleshing out of what it means to have due diligence to meet the standards of review of the statute. You've answered some of the questions that he had in this email, but I think we're gonna need more interpretation at the next meeting here as to the exact meaning of what it is we have to do and what are the consequences of it. I note on the schedule that we are the first ones to take up, and that the county rightfully is the last one to take up whether there's municipal consent, because we, the cities, are your constituents also, so probably appropriate that you're last. Anyway, we're gonna need more information.
Yep, we've been coordinating with staff and legal at each community, and so we'll continue that and make sure we have all questions answered before you get to that point of action. So just as going back to the Blue Line 1.0, that each of the cities took action to support it. Crystal took the middle action of no action. Other projects have had followed. This is not a municipal consent law just for Blue Line. This is one we've followed for each of our light rail projects to date, and so we've received consent on those projects, obviously, since we've built them. But we've worked with each city to really refine. We've wanted to enter into this process knowing every design issue that each city has, and we'll be kept providing an update of the status of each design issue with our submittal of the plans next Friday. So we believe we're in a good spot, but it is the city's decision on. Each city gets to make that decision per the statute.
When you give this design, we were at the 30%. Years ago, we were at the 90%. Brooklyn Park maybe remains at about 90%. You said we're above 30% right now. Do you have a number?
Yeah, Chair, committee member, actually, let me go back to 1.0. Actually, on 1.0, when we asked for municipal consent, there was a lot less design than we have today.
At that point.
It was about at 15% back then.
Right.
And so we've advanced much further on this project, and the northern third, of course, is almost fully designed because that's very similar to the last project. And so it's really at the 30% design generally where you want to ask for permission, because if there's some changes a community you're not too far down the road, you can start to incorporate those before you do final design. And so I think the statute is really intended to be at this point in the project, so the project sponsors have time to react and make changes without going too far backwards in the process. And so this is a normal step, kind of a good time in the design phase to ask for that consent about where the stations are and what the alignment is.
I was not kind of intimating that there's anything wrong with
Right,
what you're
right.
doing. Do you have a number that's updated more than 30%? Or
Chair, I would say about 30.
all right.
But if you're in the top northern third, you're at 90. So there's a blend in there.
All right.
Commissioner, and then Councilmember.
I'll just briefly mention that, in Brooklyn Park, as mayor, we did municipal consent. We did approve, but we added a separate letter which listed our specific items, which, obviously not binding, but that's how we did it. I know I happened to run into the former retired city manager of Crystal, and yesterday, and she mentioned when you did your no action, they also submitted a separate letter listing the things as well. So just wanted to say there's lots of places to put stuff. It's all about the comfort level of the people involved. So.
Yeah, Councilmember Ellison.
I think the mayor had his hand up first. So if you want to.
Mayor.
I'll pass the baton to you after I go quick. There's still a gap presently between where we're at and where we need to be in order to provide municipal consent. To be specific, there are 4 key areas that we're looking at. One of them is the anti-displacement work. The second is around mitigation of both noise and vibration. The third is the station at Washington and Broadway. We're also, by the way, looking for some additional concerns to be addressed as the train runs through North Loop. And then finally is the commitment from the project office on how they plan to work with the city council and my administration following that municipal consent. So we're looking to see some additional information before we move forward to that vote at that point. And I'll turn it over to Councilmember Ellison, if that's all right with you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think the mayor hit on some of the specific bullet points. I just wanted to say high level, I think there's a way for, right now, I don't know that the Minneapolis City Council is going to be in a position where they're, I don't want to speak for the whole council, I'm one member, where they're going to want to support municipal consent. So, and you've got different issues, right? You've got council members who are really concerned with the route and alignment. Might not be my issue, but there are council members who take major issue with that. You've got council members that are really concerned about anti-displacement. And I think generally you're dealing with, it feels like across the board, the bar is just being set a little bit higher than the project's used to, which I think is good. But I don't necessarily know that we are meeting that moment and saying, okay, where's the bar before people are going to be ready to move forward comfortably, cutting through a community that has a lot of distrust in these processes, and there's a lot of us that are sort of holding that line saying transit infrastructure is needed, right? We're here to be pro-transit, but we need a little bit of show and prove, a little bit of demonstration of value. And so I'm just concerned that, again, things like municipal consent, things like the route keep ticking along at this pace. I know it might feel slow to some of us, but out in the community, it feels like it's just kind of ticking along on time. And things like the anti-displacement work and a full, robust strategy, articulated strategy, real asks from the city, right? Those don't feel like they're as solid, which means that, cities and residents are concerned that once the route's approved, we're going to be left holding the bag on those other things, right? We're building a train. Good luck to you guys on anti-displacement. We had a lot of great discussion. Here's our notes. Have at it. I don't think that that's going to be acceptable to a lot of the cities along the route. And so I just wanted to offer that. I do feel like there's a way for us to not be on a collision course with an adversarial relationship with cities along the line. I think that pathway exists. I think that if municipal consent comes this fall, I think we're just on a collision for a lot of unnecessary discussion and people to sort of dig their heels in whatever it is that they're frustrated about. So I want to make sure that we're solutions oriented. I want to make sure that the council's prepared to be solutions oriented. And I do think that this current timeline with municipal consent is setting us up for failure on that.
All right, well, thanks for that comment. Connie, did you have a comment?
Yeah. History kind of repeating itself, although my experience with City of Minneapolis was 20 years ago, was a Minneapolis municipal consent process on the Crosstown project 35. It was a highway project, 35 and 62, and we had the same feelings as we were approaching to get consent, because as Nick said, the highway side has also a municipal consent law, a little bit different, but it looked like we're hitting it's going to look very difficult. And we went through the process back in 05, 06, somewhere in there. And there was a letter from Minneapolis, basically with all the requests and demands. It was 36 items, actually. And we thought it was like impossible, this project is not gonna happen, but to look at it on a positive side, it provided for a lot of discussion, a lot of good things in there. And when you sit down and discuss of the 36 items, some things needed more conversation, some things absolutely easy, yep. Some things you couldn't for this reason. So you sit down and discuss, and eventually it required a few coffee meetings and discussions, but it eventually happened and it worked out. So if that's any consolation, if it's any, give a little positive feeling that everything will be all right, hopefully.
What are you doing in the next month? All right, thanks. Go ahead, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, so I mean, as presented, Brooklyn Park remains mostly unchanged. So, I mean, we're very interested in making sure that the project moves along. Of course, I understand all the concerns everyone else has. But again, I think, let me just go back to the process itself in terms of even if it's disapproved, amendments are considered and addressed by the council. And then, there's more work that needs to be done. So I think the process is maybe flexible, but we would not want to push it out too far. And everyone knows we're super diverse. We got our biotech district that we want to build out. The final station at Oak Grove is key to our future developments in the northwest corridor or northwest area of the city. We're looking to build a larger tax base to give relief to our residents. So Brooklyn Park's interest is to help this project move along. Again, understanding all the issues that the other cities are having. So whatever we can do to help outreach, or we're hosting the events coming up. So I mean, please encourage engagement and help us move it along, because it is the success of this infrastructure is also key to Brooklyn Park residents. So just wanted to also put that out there. But again, if this can be flexible, I understand that, but let's keep it moving, because there's a lot that our city and the rest of the corridor is looking forward to as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Commissioner? Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, I think, one thing I think it would be helpful for all of us is to be specific on what you're looking for. Because I hear a lot of, general stuff, and I'm always like, look at Mayor Blonigan just by, what's specific? Like, very specific. I come from the sales world. A very specific question is, what, thing do you want to see? And then if we can't deliver on what you want to see. So I think it behooves all of us involved in this process, and to be specific with the community, to be like, what specifically, like, is it, you're not seeing something, what is that? Because I can guess all day long, and as my wife will tell you, I'm not a good guesser as to what is going on. I also am very keen on that anti-displacement has to hit the perfect mark, because if we are late, we are not going to deliver on displacement. If we're early, right? So I think that this timeline and stuff is important, because people are starting to make investment decisions, and the money that we have acquired and pulled together starts to get stretched thinner as people are starting to compete for bids and they're buying properties. Suddenly, we are not able to take that money that we have for anti-displacement and make it last. And I know that the next stage for a lot of municipal consent is to get some of the foundational partners, people who might put $1 million into a fund, might put $5 million into a fund. They're not doing anything until Ms. consent. So we have this we have to hit this moving target. We have to thread the needle. And I would just ask everyone to be very specific. And I don't mean that as a stance. I mean, Irene, I will meet with anybody, and we'll ask very specifically, and then if we can identify those, I think that helps all of us, at every step of the way to understand if there is something that you feel is missing, and I think that would be helpful, because we've been all working on it. I'm ready to vote, and so we all want to get to that part where we're all together.
Yeah, Irene?
Yes, thank you. Really appreciate that everyone's kind of keyed in on this, and I know that when deadlines come up, it's always a little tough. And I, Irene, want to ride this train in this decade. Like, in order to do that by 2030 even, it's important that we stay on track. This is 30% design. This is not everything. A lot of this is FTA required because we're trying to split the bill entirely with them. We're even trying to have them pay a little bit more than half, I mean, quite frankly. So I just can't express enough. October 10 seems like a short amount of time, and we as electeds do a lot of stuff in a couple months. We pass budgets in a few months, elections will be won and lost in a few months, and personally, my commitment from the very beginning, when it wasn't this alignment and it wasn't any of these things, it's the fastest way to get this much needed transit and transportation service to residents. The studies were from the 80s and 90s. I don't know the initial studies that this corridor is in need of transit connection, in need of tax base, in need of completing the vision that community members have already outlined for themselves. So I know it's not always comfortable, and it obviously has not and will not be easy. And I am hopeful that we can get very specific on if it's an additional station or if it is I actually haven't weighed in on actual route or station design since 2020, because I knew there's going to be so many different perspectives. I'm quite interested in what are those aspects that might really change the math for municipalities or community groups to feel very proud and excited. And selfishly, I'm hopeful that this is open by the next census. The food insecurity, housing lack of access, green spaces. I mean, I want that next census, which we're not going to get the results till 2031, 32. But I want that next census to be just like the glow up of all glow ups for the whole corridor, and certainly for where I call home. So those are my few senses. Oh, and for anti-displacement, I know for the county, we are trying to repivot. What are we already doing that might be considered within anti-displacement? All of us have various versions, or many of us have various versions of tax authority. It's not like a line item for anti-displacement. It's what were the recommendations in there that really match, right? Those are from our residents. That's from the group that we helped to establish. So that's gonna take longer because a lot of that comes through budget process, right? Local electeds, local jurisdictions do budget in Q4. So why have we not had some big splash about it? It's because quite frankly, we haven't, arrived fully at our 2025 budget yet, just as you all haven't. But that is something that Hennepin is thinking of. The 10 million at the legislature and the legislature established board, that's not just a committee, that's not just a resident group. That is a legislature established board that is towards this end. And yes, it just got started, and it got started. So ton of work. This is not meant to dismiss anything, but just always, I might be pep talking myself too. But this looks like a short amount of time. But I really individually will do everything I can. And the Hennepin County has expressed its commitment. I want to ride the train this decade. And in order to do that, we got to attempt to match the timeline that staff and our partners at FTA have worked to construct. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And go ahead.
I think you all got a copy of the letter from the City of Crystal, and I think the letter speaks for itself, but I just want to make sure that's added to the record.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for all these thoughts. I will say, from a Met Council's point of view, which is managing the municipal approval process, they will take all these comments and considerations and schedule into consideration and to be thoughtful. And I appreciate both the thoughts and the passion and the concerns. And we want to get this right, but we also don't want to lose windows of opportunity. So, and with regard to Crystal, we did receive the letter, so I know that's part of the record. As a recovering former MnDOT commissioner, I have great sympathy and understanding about turnback and jurisdictional alignment issues. And I know those can be really frustrating. And I'm happy that we actually have Hennepin County here, and as I understand, are at the table, knowing that that is something, although outside of the Blue Line extension project, it is an issue to be solved, and appreciate that. With that, I want to make sure we get a moment to talk about cost and ridership, because those matter. And we have some updates built upon what you've already heard, and we're now at 30%, as we heard this earlier, design, so we may have a little bit better numbers.
Couple slides here, Chair, to provide you new information. Again, we last provided this information in March. We said we'd come back before municipal consent started, once 30% design. We've got some updated guidance from FTA about how to model ridership. We will now just be considering post-pandemic forecast, which is, I think, an important update to the data. And we've also added another year since our last update, so we have new data going into the model. We, last time up, we have our new ridership up forecast of 12,000 to 13,700 rides per day on the new extension segment. This, of course, the day we open the extension, it just becomes the Blue Line. So overall, the Blue Line, including the existing Blue Line, would have over 30,000 rides per day. This is a 2045 number. And so this is a strong number. This would make us the second busiest Metro Transit line in the system behind the Green Line. Rail remains our most high ridership type of route that we build. And so the number is about 500 per day higher than the number we gave you in March. That reflects the updated information and really reflects the fact that we've added 2023 as the base, and our ridership is rebounding since pandemic. We're in double-digit growth, and 2023 was double-digit growth from 2022. And so our model now reflects that. And so we're seeing pretty strong recovery in ridership, particularly on routes like this that are all-day frequent service. Base costs, before we gave a range of 2.9 to 3.2 billion. As we've advanced the design, we've learned more. We've decided to hold a contingency of 37.5%, which is higher than FTA requires, but we feel we would like to have a higher contingency for some of the risks related to a rail project in our environment. And so that puts our new cost estimate, we're moving away from a range to a fixed number of $3.2 billion. This is a number that reflects inflation to the year of construction. So this is for 12 stations on the existing alignment. If, as we mentioned through the municipal consent process, there are some changes to the design, we will update the cost to reflect any of those changes. And so, for example, if we add a station, we'll update it. This is the cost based on the design we're submitting with municipal consent. This would be broken down in different elements that you see here, construction being the largest element of it. How does this compare? There are 4 other light rail projects nationally in the pipeline that are very comparable in terms of urban environments. You see the costs here. Sets us up very, these are large infrastructure projects, very expensive when you're building a long route such as this through existing developed communities. But our cost per mile is significantly less than the comparable projects in the pipeline. These are projects that we're all essentially competing with for funding from FTA. And so it sets us up strongly compared to some of these projects. We are a little more advanced than all of these projects, and so we are in that engineering phase. They're still in the project development phase. So those 4 projects' costs will likely change more than our costs will because they're a little bit earlier in their design process. But it positions us strongly at a national level.
Mr. Chair, really quick, can you go back to?
Yep.
It's not even really comparable. It's the far right column that's interesting. 238 million per mile is what we're proposing, and see how much higher. And so from a competitiveness standpoint, when we visited the FTA, and the committees, they outlined this as a highlight. So you're very
I'm not
kind of
bragging.
low key about it, but that's just a significantly more cost effective. And so that's another reason why you might hear Jeff and myself saying, let's really, what do you think should be included? And the project office needs to determine if that makes sense or not. Because when we split down the middle, or maybe even 60-40 or 55-45, it's this larger number that we're splitting. And so the shifting from 2020 to present is actually quite interesting. A lot of these have ballooned because of project costs, because they weren't able to amend their project. We've been able to amend our project. And so again, we still want to be appropriate with our funds. Obviously, staying on schedule is one of the biggest things to keeping a project down, as we learned from other rail projects, et cetera. And you were so low-key about it, Nick. I just had to shout that out a little bit. It's like not even, because most people aren't dealing with like M's and B's as the number, right? Millions and billions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just briefly, this number is the number I think the county board worries about, which is the funding part. We know the Met Council, our partners, has got the operational side, but this is, as we look down, we talk about municipal consent, our thing is always, we're jointly going to the DC and making the case, selling this project as benefit to all the people that we want to benefit from it and all the work that we're doing. So these are good numbers. The timelines matter. The work that we're doing anti-displacement will matter to the FTA. So, yeah, and it says 3.2, but remember, if we do our job right, it's 1.6 from us, 1.6 from them roughly. And so that's the game, is to get as much of our own money back from the federal government, because it'll go somewhere else, as you can tell. They'll send the Minnesota taxes somewhere else.
And our trips to the FTA and the senior administrators and staff at FTA have been very supportive, and I think we've had some good credibility as to how we approach this project. So, yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Quick question. So what makes it so different? Is it the characteristics of the project, the cost per mile? Do these costs need to be normalized to so you're comparing the same thing?
No tunnels and no co-location.
Well, yeah, I mean, like in Seattle,
Walls.
Puget Sound, I don't know where those, Sound Transit, so I mean, those are difficult areas to build things.
Very
So
different.
that's why that's 1.2 billion for, have they been normalized, or are they comparable?
These are just the program costs, so they're normalized in that they're light rail projects competing for the same funding source, but they are much more complex environments. And definitely West Coast and East Coast projects are generally more expensive bidding environments than ours. We have some market advantages here that we've taken advantage of from our
The
contractors.
LA one's pretty cheap, the Los Angeles one. 344.
Yeah.
All right.
Bargain.
Just a couple more slides. Operating costs. What's that?
One question.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
When it comes to ridership, we feel that the EJ communities will be using this line the most. And so when it comes to construction costs, is there something in place that's going to guarantee like a minimum of like, say, 5% is going to be put into place to help with that?
For like DBE businesses who are part of the construction process, is that?
For
Yes.
the contractors who would build the project, is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a federal process that will follow couple of things. The disadvantaged businesses there'll be a goal set on the construction contracts. As an example, on Green Line extension, I believe we're at 21% of the construction dollars are being spent on are going to small business firms that are disadvantaged business certified. The other component is the workforce, who are the workers on the project, and there'll be goals set for who works on the project too. And so those goals haven't been set, they'll be set, but we anticipate similar to Green Line Extension, probably in the 15 to 20% DBE goal will be set on the project. So that would be, that amount of work of the construction would go to small firms, disadvantaged businesses. It's a great question. Couple more operating costs. We do need to project our operating costs. This one is a Metropolitan Council cost that will be covered through the new regional sales tax as the primary funding source for this. This is just an early estimate that we do through our model. As we get closer to actually operations, it'll refine the model. But it's based on the number of miles of track, how frequent the trains run, how many people we need to maintain the trains, and other operating costs. But roughly, opening year would be about $54 million per year. We estimate that we'll need 200 to 250 new employees at Metro Transit to operate and maintain this this section of the extension. For this, it's very similar to Green Line Extension in terms of the number of new staff positions we'll be creating. To get federal funds, you need to be rated strongly at medium or higher in the federal process. New criteria came out this spring that made this project even stronger in the rating system. We believe that we are at least a medium, maybe higher, based on current criteria. So we're positioned strongly to be competitive for federal funds based on all the inputs for the project that FTA requires. And we're starting to, when we model out the ridership, we're also kind of the model tells us about where they get on, which stations, and how they arrive at those stations. As you can see, this helps us inform where we need park and rides and where a lot of the ridership will come either by walking or biking or connecting service. And so just, this is the estimated ridership boardings. The bigger the circle, that means the busier the station, essentially, is the way to look at this. Those with bigger red areas are the places we'll have park and rides. So we'll anticipate several passengers or customers arrive via personal vehicle being dropped off or parking and riding. So this is a first snapshot of kind of where the ridership is expected based on projected land uses. Key takeaways on this new information is we do believe this remains a very strongly competitive based on ridership and cost and other elements for federal funds. And the increasing rebounding ridership from pandemic is good for our region as a whole, but also for this project. And just lastly, noting this a little bit about who the riders will be. The model is projecting almost half of the riders don't own a vehicle. And so this is going to be their primary mode for transportation other than walking and biking or other transit. So this is a really strong quarter for need for transit, and it'll serve this community well if built.
I want to say so. That last line is so important because we talk about what it matters to the people, and I think some of us are guilty, frankly, of saying they support transit, and then this is the part that it matters. And this is the part that I think that people need to stop and really think about what we miss when people don't have access to transportation. Try it once and see how far you get, how far it is to get to work, to food, to school, to parks when you don't have that. And so this is to me, the biggest statement on why this line is needed.
It's 3:02. You've presented a lot of information, and thank you all for your questions, your comments, your participation today. Next CMC meeting is August 8th, which is 2 days after August 6th, which is the end of these SDEIS comment period. Also, National Night Out. With that, it's a beautiful day today, so enjoy your evenings. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you for coming.